In the first part, I was saying there are two parts. Part one has to do with the reference to science and intuition. And I want to make sure that I'm not talking against science. I'm actually talking about using science and intuition because that's ultimately, to me, the way to go. In our culture, in this civilized culture, in the Western world, we are primarily science oriented. And I don't believe that we give intuition the credit that it needs. So I like to make a distinction between two different cultures, the civilized culture and the indigenous worlds. And because ultimately, I want to be able to use what the indigenous peoples know as well as the scientific people know. Because I believe both of us will allow us to be more balanced as we deal with issues and understand things. So to explain the difference, the civilized world to me seeks to conquer, control, and understand its environment. It looks outside of itself because it can only be validated by people out from outside you with somebody else. Since in the scientific world, we don't know how to measure or how to understand what's going on inside of a person. Everything happens outside of us. In this civilized world, it is also a system that's based on win-lose. And the idea of win-lose is that for anybody to win, you must understand somebody must lose. The civilized world is workable. It can create a lot of good things, but it leads to dissatisfaction. And you might note that when you get something, after a while, you lose interest or it's hard to stay satisfied with it. I'll come back to that. The indigenous world, to me, feel like that they are a part of the environment. They seek to be connected with their environment as opposed to dominating and controlling their environment. Civilized indigenous people learn to look inside themselves and see this connection from inside out. It's more of a win-win consciousness, if not totally win-win. It's more of a win-win consciousness and seeks to be in harmony with this environment. Out of this, the next level of understanding with this has to do with intellect and intuition. Of course, the intellect is a civilized way. Intuition, I believe, is the indigenous way. The intellect has to do with reasoning. It's the faculty of reasoning that seeks to understand things objectively, which means, again, going outside of itself, especially as it relates to abstract and academic matters. It seeks scientific understanding, which we'll get into later. And it seeks facts that can be validated externally. The intuition way, to me, is knowing without external validation. What you just experienced when you went to your heart is the beginning of a process of knowing that it's difficult to explain it to anybody unless they have been there themselves. It's the ability to understand something immediately without conscious reasoning because you're connected. So you might look at the experience of knowing you have a hand. You can feel that, you can see that, you can experience that. And although it can be validated outside, you can feel that inside. So it's all based on a feeling, and that feeling allows you to validate things internally. So what I've worked on in all my years is what I call the heart-centered being. I notice that other people talk about heart-centered, but when they talk about heart-centered, it seems to me they're going from outside in rather than inside out. And what I just had you to do in feeling the love you have for someone and someone has for you or an animal, feeling the love you have for the animals and an animal has for you, you go inside and you actually feel your heart energy. When you can feel your heart energy, you have the entrance to your true self. So we think of civilized versus indigenous. We think of intellect versus intuition. When it boils down to me individually, our programmed self and true self. The civilized world, let's back up. I believe we choose to be born. When we choose to be born, coming down from source to this earth, we choose our parents, our environment, because we come here because we have a set of things we come here to learn. Because we know things already, especially as it relates to people like my age and perhaps yours, we have to lose much of what we know, because if our cup is already full, it's hard to have additional experiences. So we get programmed by our parents, by the religious institutions, by the schools, by our friends, by the media, and out of this, we began to run our own program independent of that, which I call the program self. The program self, as with the civilized world and the intellect, has to be validated outside. You have to be validated by people outside of you. There's one more characteristic of this that's difficult that causes this problem, and that is we can only manage one variable at a time. We can only deal with one thing at a time. It's hard to multitask. I like to go to my true self once I've found that, because my true self is the real me. It is heart-centered. And that heart-centered is directly connected with the source. Whether you want to call it God or creator, it makes me no difference. It's the source. And from that source, we can manage many variables at once. And one of the things you can do on your own is to, from your program self, from you ordinarily, by just looking outside yourself, choose any 5 things or 5 people and focus on number 1. And notice when you focus on number 1, you can focus on number 3. Or number 4, you can't focus on number 2. You can only focus on one at a time. But when you go to your true self, you can manage multiple variables. And notice you can manage all 5 of those things at once. And my understanding of that is, since we're connected with a source, with God or whatever you have, since God is connected with everything, we are connected with everything. Out of that comes a sense of knowing. And knowing has to do with that because we are already a part of it, it's easier to understand that. It's easier to know that. But more importantly, in our true self, we can use both sides of the brain. We can use our intellect and intuition at the same time. And that's the part that really excites me, that motivates me. The next step in dealing with this, and I'm giving different definitions now. I have different definitions for most things. The next step is connection versus attachment. In the civilized world, we are attached to each other. And notice that when you're attached to someone or someone's attached to you, you drain them or they drain you. You get energized by them, But when you get energized for them, it drains them, or vice versa. That brings up a win-lose paradigm. In the attachment, as with the intellectual, as with the civilized world, we think about emotions. I have a different definition of emotions. I distinguish between emotions and feelings. Feelings has to do with connection. Emotion has to do with attachments. And emotions, to me, are blocked feelings. So, in connection, each person gives and receives with each other. Whereas attachment, one person gives energy to the other, or vice versa. When in connection, you're giving and receiving on both sides. Therefore, each person is energized. And what's important about that is this creates synergy, where 1 plus 1 is not just 2, it could be 10, 100, a billion, depending on the extent of the connection. Therefore, it is a win-win proposition. That leads to science. I've been trained as a scientist. I've been an engineer. I have a master's degree in theoretical chemistry and a PhD in social psychology of health. And I've been an engineer and a chemist. Worked on some of the original stealth bomber research back in the 60s. Worked as a chemist, applied research chemist for a oil-based company, and created 3 patents on the first projects that I worked on from each one. So I do understand that process. Science can be defined as a systematic approach that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictions about the universe. Science can be used to discover new and wonderful things, but sometimes dangerous, like the atom bomb. Teller said after he saw the explosion and what happened in Japan, he wished he had never done that. He saw the results of that. So science to me is practiced in the civilized world, but the problem is it doesn't have an inner barometer that allows you to make better decisions about things. Science also looks at the brain as being the center. If you look at many of the scientific and sci-fi movies, they look at the ultimate brain as being highly developed and you can do all the things with the brain. I don't agree with that. It does not lead to the ultimate consciousness. It does lead to wonderful things, but it doesn't have the barometer. But the brain is not the only intelligent or conscious organ in the body. Every part of your body is conscious. And it's that total consciousness of each part, as we talked earlier about, that creates consciousness. So it's achieved by utilizing the whole body. And that's why I want to use the whole brain, using the whole body, because I can use the both sides of the brain and the whole body at the same time. The whole body, a whole brain concept can be accessed through the heart. So the heart is the center of our being. It is connected to source. It astonishes me when people say, my heart is broken. Your heart cannot be broken. It can be blocked by fear and emotions. But you find that when you go to your heart and actually experience fear and emotion, the fear and emotion goes away. Operating from the heart allows one to access total consciousness, both internal and external. In other words, it allows one to act as a whole. So, this leads to operations, which might be looked at as paradigms. A paradigm is a distinct set of concepts or thought patterns that includes theories, methods, and standards. It is the foundation of how we operate in our environment. It solves problems, which I'll discuss a little bit later. The difficulty is that at any given time, there are multiple paradigms operating at once. So I also want to bring up the idea of a paradigm shift, because a paradigm shift is a major change in how concepts and practices can be accomplished. It is an ongoing process, which I'll give some examples of. One of the examples of looking at paradigm shifts is through S-shaped curves. So this is an example of an S-shaped curve. And I have it split up into sections. You have the blue sections, which is the current way that you might have of solving problems, because a paradigm allows you to solve problems. And you might think about it, in life, we are about solving problems constantly in all kinds of ways. And those paradigms allows us ways of solving those problems. The yellow section is where those problems, it's like the percentage of problems solved by that paradigm, because of the way things happen, becomes less and less. A new paradigm emerges, and you might look at that black section as an exponential curve that shows up growth. The orange is the midpoint, that where the new paradigm is taken over. The gray is where now the new paradigm is taken over and is solving problems and going to the next level. So we can talk about multiple paradigm shifts. And I give some examples of that. And in my lifetime, going back to the 40s, I've seen many types of phones. I remember the rotary phone that we had. And then we got a push button phone. And then we got a cordless phone. And then portable phones. In fact, I remember the first portable phones I saw that was the size of a small suitcase. I also remember the first portable phone I saw was in a car. One of my best friends in '68 bought a new car, and he had a phone in the car. And it was like I could call home and say, guess where I am, calling you. Then we got the cell phone. And I remember the cell phone, I didn't want to deal with that. And for about 10 years, I'd sort of ignored it until I realized that with the cell phone, well, I travel quite a bit, and I call my wife every night that I'm out of town. We had a big phone bill. And I found out that using the cell phone, I didn't have to charge me, pay for it every time I called home. That was the beginning of this process. Now I have my smartphone. And can you be without your smartphone? It's like everything is there. Mm-hmm. So you might think of the paradigm shifts. Again, for my generations, in some of the courses I teach, we talk about generations of people, employees, and so forth. And in this case, we are the silent generation from the 1928 to 1945, which actually I was born in '39, so I was born in that period. Then we had the baby boomers from 46 to 64, the generation X, 65 to 80, and so on. I don't want to get into the particulars of all of that, and all you got to do is go on the internet, you'll find the information that you need about that. We can use paradigms in sport, shifts in sports. Think about the three-point shot and how that's changed. Think about the different offenses that have evolved over the years. And I go back to Bill Russell and the Celtics back in the 60s. We can talk about that. Also in football, in all kind of ways, the new offenses and defense that change over time. In science paradigms, we can think about pre-Newtonian, Newtonian physics, and quantum mechanics. So I'll stop right here before I go into section 2, and I'll entertain questions and comments.
So you wrote something down there.
Oh, I had so many questions that there's too many to hold. I think with all this information, to me, my mind always goes back to how do I use it? How do I use this information on mundane, daily things, making decisions? When you're talking about intellect versus intuition, and it's nice to use both. When you're talking about paradigm shifting, how can you, or can you induce one, or does life push you, like you said, because we always are solving problems? Do we have to face a problem? Is that what induces that paradigm shift, or can we,
Let's take that one by itself first. The paradigm shifts occurs because the information that you have and the ability to solve problems that you have at some point becomes less and less. And somebody comes up with a new idea. So go back to the first Gulf War. We were able to surprise the people in the Middle East, Iraq, because they didn't think we could cross the desert. They already had, what do you call it? Oh, wow, I'm getting the block. When you can locate your phone, when you know where you are.
Yes.
Okay. So the military already had that. In many cases, what we have in using the phone and ideas, the military had that 20 years before. The problem is, as we grow, as we live, we become dissatisfied with things, new products are developed. New ideas are developed. So this is an ongoing process. You might look at your growth. When you were in high school, how you thought. When you got to college, how you thought. And when you left and you started working, those were shifts because of necessity of being. That you encounter things that you needed better tools to work with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the paradigm shifts occurs because in the civilized world, we constantly need things to satisfy us. And that's why I said it's dissatisfying. The intellect versus intuition, we are a culture. We are a culture that utilizes intellect that is data that we can make sense that has to be validated outside. So, but the problem is, think about people who say, I'm being logical. I don't agree with that. They're using logic, but they started from an illogical reference. They don't really know what logic is as far as that goes in most cases. But it's about solving problems. So here you are, you've been told you need to know these things. However, unconsciously, to really know these things, you have to know it from the inside out, and you don't recognize you're doing that. So think about what you know and how you know. You know it based on experiences. So you might say, we have experiences. And as we have experiences, we try to make sense of things. At some point, we have trouble making sense of things. And over a period of time, that's where a shift can occur, if that makes sense. Go ahead.
All right. So when we have a decision to make, so we can use our intellect and we can use our intuition. And most often we're using our intellect. And you're saying we can use both. The intellect.
I'm saying this. I want to use both. My decision is I want to be in the whole brain true self most of the time. Because when I'm in the whole brain true self mode, I can use both intellect and intuition at the same time. When I try to use intellect, I have difficulty functioning. I didn't know this. When I was a chemist and I got those patents, the ideas came from my intuition. The intellect, and I didn't know I was doing that. The intellect is what my training did as in graduate school that allowed me to make it do experiments and go through the process of elimination and going through theories and validating things. But the actual ideas to solve problems came from my intuitive self. So I'm saying I want to use my true self on purpose, consciously, so I can use both modes at the same time. That's what I'm leading to here. So this discussion is about getting to the point where we can use both the intellect and intuition together.
I think maybe what's getting stuck in my mind is, for example, why a lot of people use intellect and how intellectual people will kind of say, you know, don't use intuition. And I think it's especially maybe on a personal level for each person, it's because we want validation, we want confirmation. So I'm thinking when we say a lot of people use more intellect than intuition nowadays, or so far, it's because I'm thinking that we get more confirmation, more validation when we use the intellect.
Let's go back to the program itself. I'm saying this. When we're born, and we choose to be born, we come down to the earth and we forget most of what we know. Younger people in that 20 to 30 and 30 to 40 groups, many of them didn't forget everything. I helped them understand how to use what they know. The problem is, once you get programmed by your parents, by the church, by your school, you have to think in a certain way. So think about this. If you're an accountant, you have to follow the rules of accounting. I remember I had a program at OU I was head of a program at OU back in University of Oklahoma back in the 70s, and I had a contract with the government. And I had monies to spend. And I went to the guy that was in the accounting department that was over my program, and I said, I want to buy this product. And he said, you can't. And I said, what do you mean I can't? It shows I have $500 here. He said, you can't because you have $250 of that amount encumbered. What? What the heck is encumbered? Well, some 20 years later, as I was training for the state of Oklahoma employees, I got a contract to teach accounting, and all of a sudden, I began to understand what encumbered and unencumbered meant. What I'm saying is, as a lawyer, as an accountant, as whatever occupation you have, there are rules you learn to operate by, and you cannot go outside those rules. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're processing.
I'm processing. Again, I think maybe the easiest way for the mind to understand it is to use it in a practical way.
Oh.
All right. Go ahead.
English.
Hmm.
When you speak English, remember they talk about the King's English and speaking properly and all this kind of stuff? What do they teach you to do? So English is a paradigm, is a process that you have to follow the rules of English, be understood. French. You have to follow the rules of French. And the rules of French are slightly different. You don't say the house is white, you say the White House is. Le blanc maison être. Go ahead. Are you understanding what I'm saying now?
I am. I just needed to become practical. Let's say.
Well, give me an example of what you, give me a question then.
Help me out. Like you have a decision to make. Where, let's say deciding to move, whether we should move from Rhode Island to Texas.
Yes.
All right. And so intuitively, what is that? Like follow your bliss. What feels better for you is, let's say, okay, we'll move to Texas. But then intellectually, it'll say, that, wait a minute, you're settled here. Your brain can come out with concrete ways that kind of like maybe make more sense. The move is going to cost, putting everything on a truck is going to cost.
Yes, I got that.
It's going to take time, for you to start your business over again. So you've got an intuition where, you know what, I really want to go back to Texas.
Okay, I'm speaking it differently. So do this. First of all, go to your place of peace. Breathe gently and deeply. Create the mirror image and bring it back to you all the way to 10, and then go to the next level of peace, oneness, love, and connection. And let me know when you're there without doing anything else.
I'm ready.
Now, I want you to go to all the emotional responses that you have and feel those emotions as strongly as you can. Let me know when you're there.
Yeah.
Now go back to that place of peace. Breathing gently and deeply. What happens to the emotions?
They disappear.
Let it disappear completely. And as it disappears completely, now you want to go to doing what's best for both of you. Now what comes to mind? If you could do whatever you wanted to do, and there were no limitations, no barriers, absolutely nothing to stop you, what would you be doing?
Yeah, I'd be leaving Rhode Island.
That's your answer.
So what about the real world?
No, that is the real world. Wait, that is, wait. Back up. How many times have you said, I can't figure this out, I don't know what to do, and you stop and let go, and the answer comes to you? How many times have you been bothered about something, and all of a sudden, when you let go, there it is, the answer? What's the difference?
I understand, the point that you're making, because I have felt those moments in my life, but I guess
And I'm saying do it consciously.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm showing you a way of doing that. So when I go to that place of peace, like when I was developing this program, this PowerPoint, I thought I'd finished. And several times this week, I've got downloads in meditation. And I write it down, but what I found I can do now is when I come back to my computer, I'm in front of my computer now, I can go to that place of peace and go back to that state, and those answers come back to me. So what I'm saying to you is, in most cases, in your program self, you're going to doubt everything you think because it's natural. Because unless somebody validates it outside of you, you have doubts. But in your true self, there are no doubts.
Yeah. And sometimes that intellectual self, the intuition, you cannot prove what you know intuitively, like that you chose to be born, you chose these parents, you know, that intuitive knowledge that, yeah, I feel this is right and nah, I don't want this. You can't.
But I'm saying to you, if you do it in your normal mind, you're going to have doubts. That's the program mind. That's why I talk about shifting from the program self to the true self. That's why I start off with the meditation, because I want to get you in your true self and reinforce that.
So I guess I think what I think I'm searching for is maybe that trust through confirmation that I made a decision, and I let, like, using intellect and intuition, but then went mostly with intuition, and then I would love that confirmation back from in reality that, you know what, you made the right decision. And that might take years to be proven.
No, it's when you feel it's right. That's what I'm saying to you. Again, what you're doing, I know what you're doing now. I wish I could have both of us at the same time. It's going back and forth, but I'll just deal with it as it is. What I'm saying to you is, what you're doing is you're making the decision, but shifting back to your program self. And I'm saying every time you shift back to your program self, you're going to have a problem. That's why I talk about practicing being in your true self. Because your program self will never be validated, will never allow the true self to validate it. It can't. It's not trained to. Oh, okay. There's an old book that I've read years ago that I come back to. It's called Inner Skiing, Inner Golf, Inner Tennis by Galway. And it talks about self one and self two. Self one is the program self. Self two is the true self. And what you have to do to play golf, you have to use self one to train, but then to use self two to play. If you try to play from self one, you're not going to win. You're not going to do your best. So athletes, musicians, people of all types of talents and so forth, when they actually play, they're in their true self. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So the doubts are natural because you're in your program self. That's what you have to do, is immediately go to your true self, go to your heart. So
Right.
I understand. You got that gut feeling that says something is wrong. Is that correct?
Yes, or you have a gut feeling that tells you.
I mean, right now.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes.
I feel it. That's how I know. You got the gut feeling that something is wrong. And I'm saying, I know you're having that. And I'm saying, shift to your heart. and let the emotion go away. That's why you want to release the emotional content.
All right.
That's an ongoing process.
We've gone through part 1, and we're almost there at the hour mark.
Yeah, I know.
I'd like to save part 2 for another session, but with the remaining time, if you can give us just a practical practice that we can do when we find ourselves, or do daily, or when we find ourselves in a situation where it's really life depends on this. This could be a pivotal point.
Okay, let me do. I'm gonna stop the screen sharing. Good, I can see both now, because I can only see one. This is better. I have 2 women's groups that I work with. And in fact, I had my first schism about a month ago, because one group decided they wanted another direction. So I have 2 groups. That was one group. But anyway. How often do you meditate?
Daily.
And how do you meditate?
I feel like there are different levels of meditation.
No, it's not what I asked you. How often do you meditate?
How often?
Yes.
Daily, sometimes more than once a day.
Okay, I'm recommending twice a day. One, I'm saying I meditate daily sometime between 3 and 4:30 in the morning for 30 minutes or more. I recommend regularly around 6:30. I meditate regularly around 6:30. So what I'm saying to you, one, is meditating without trying. It's breathing. So close your eyes. Go to your heart. Breathe gently and deeply, and just focus on your breathing. And every time whatever stuff comes in, let it come and go back to the breath. Go back to the breath. As you practice this for 24 minutes at a time, 1 minute for each hour a day, twice a day, that's 1. 2, once you've done that for a while, periodically during the day, go to that meditation for 5 minutes, a couple of minutes, to reset it yourself. Now, on my website, I have 2 exercises. One is called the 5-day and one is called the candle, that can help you to get your focus and attention. I learned this through the School of Metaphysics years ago, back in the 80s. And I found it to be a very good tool of training the body and the mind to be in focus. So what it requires now is a commitment. This is what I do with my students. People want to get to start doing things now. That doesn't work. Did either of you play an instrument when you were younger?
I don't.
Tried.
Okay, sing.
Right.
Did you play sports?
Yes.
Okay, so Nick, when you played sports, did you just jump right in there and do it?
Okay.
How did you become good at it?
Over time.
No, but what did you do?
Ran track. I was a track.
What did you do though?
Practice.
You practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went to college on a track scholarship. I ran the 440, anything from the 100 to the 880. I do understand this. If you don't build up your muscles and your energy and your strength, when I was in high school, we ran 8 races in a day.
Wow.
This is back in the 60s, the 50s. So I was in shape. So what I'm saying to you, in order to run whatever you did, you had to practice starts. You had to practice sprinting. You had to practice distance running to build your body. So remember the first of the season, and you started maybe the first meet, you got tired, out of breath. But as you practice, your body builds up stamina. So I'm saying to you, the 5-day, the candle, the meditations is a way of building. That's the practice. The practice playing the John Paul Rinpoche, the flutist, if you know what that is. He's one of the most famous flutists, if he's still alive. He talked about practicing scales every day. Every day. Like from age 9 to 13 or 15. That may not be completely right, but, and guess what? His fingers, he knew every note, what it was supposed to be. You can't play unless you do that. So I'm saying to you, the key to everything is practice, commitment. And here's what you can do. I do practice my meditation every day, at least once. And I've been doing that since the late 70s. I still have difficulty at times. I have multiple ways of meditating, and it's just whatever comes to me at the time. And I use that. I have prayer beads that I made myself. I was diagnosed with prostate problems 20 years ago, and I've been clear for 19 years. And for a year, I did 2 Buddha chants. I didn't miss a day. Twice a day, Om Shri Maha Lakshmi Swaha and Om Akaya Namaha, 108 times each time, twice a day. I didn't miss a day. That's empowering. That was part of my healing process. So I'm saying to you, without practice, without consistent doing, prayer beads is a good way of doing meditation. You focus on one beat at a time. I mean, it's all kinds of ways to do that. Breathing is one of the better, it's one of the more consistent ways. So I'm saying to you, the key is practice. The key is having a regimen that you can practice every day. And every time you have those doubts, even if you think about it 2 weeks later, do it right then. Go to your place of peace and get rid of the emotions and clear it.
Yeah.
That way I've shown you of clearing those emotions. Do that 2 or 3 times a day for at least 2 weeks. Because you have to hear emotional stuff, especially what's going on right now. And you want to lower that below your ankles. Because then you have more of your self available to you. So it's like degrees of freedom. And right now, with all the emotions, we're up to here. If we have 100 degrees of freedom, we use it up 98, try to deal with stuff. When you want to be, I always say to people, and I have to go back to you, 2% available. That circle coming back to you that we do, I want to operate energy coming back to me at least at 80% most of the time. Because when I operate less than that, I can't make good decisions. When I'm at 85% and 90%, I can do whatever I wanted to do. I can create, I can do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Let's, when do we, I have to think, like, when do we get to practice life? And I'll use this question, well, I'll use this as an example. Like, I didn't get to practice choosing colleges. When it was that time in life, it was just that time to choose. It was like, you either go here or you go there. There was never a time to like practice how to choose going to college or practice how to choose your profession.
How are you? How old are you?
30, how old am I? 31?
Okay. Wait now. Understand this. I didn't start understanding who I am until 35.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start developing who I am till 38. So you ahead of schedule. So forget it. I told you, you're one of my special people. I'm serious. You're one of my special people. So what I'm saying to you is, doesn't matter when you start now.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about what you did in college. I mean, I went to college because I went to Langston University in Oklahoma because I wanted to get away from Little Rock. I got a full ride, anyway, in track and band. Then graduate school, things just happened with me. But I'm saying to you, I went with the flow. I was in a flow. I didn't know that consciously. So I'm talking about consciously being in a flow now.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happened a long time ago is finished. You had that experience. You start now. You say, I want to be in control of my life. I realize, so look at when you've been in your program self, how much difficulty you have. But look at when you did things you really wanted to do. And I bet you realize you were in your true self and didn't know it.
Let's see.
So I'm saying now to be conscious in your true self.
That part would be, oh man, how can I put this? If I go back and I look at things that I did that I really wanted to do, I would look at them now and go like, man, that was kind of almost like destructive because it wasn't constructive because it was always trying to go against something. And that's what felt good. Like, I don't want to be.
Wait. Did you do it?
Did I do what? Did I do what I felt?
Did you do what you set out to do?
Oh yeah, you do what you feel. Yeah.
No, wait now. You did what you set out to do. I'm saying forget about the destructive part. But look at what you were able to accomplish when you put your mind to it, your body to it. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Now I'm saying, understanding, I want to be constructive, as you say. I've done enough things in past life that I don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. And thank God I can say sometimes when I've had chances to go there, I do not want to go there. I know what the price is. So I've been able to choose a path that's constructive for me. I have done some destructive things. I won't even go in there. Mm-hmm. We don't even want to go there. I've done some things. But I learned from that. So I'm saying, look at the constructive things you did. What is called no mind. You were in a no mind state. Now, what did you run in track?
I did the 200, I did the 400, and occasionally I did the 800.
Okay. So what were your times in the 200 and 800?
Oh, man. My best time, the last time I ran the 2 was like a 22 or 21 when I did the 200.
Okay. 400.
Ew. Oh, man, this is tough. The best time in the 400 was probably maybe a 48 or a 50.
Okay. My mile relay team went to the national NAI meet in 1961 in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We forgot our uniforms. Our warm-ups. Yeah. We had our uniform, and we were running around in street clothes. We all tried in the open quarter and the open 100, and nobody placed. Although our best man ran a 9.5, but Bob Hayes ran a 9.3, if you understand. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we had a mile relay. We was going to go home, but we decided to do it anyway. We ran consistently here in Oklahoma with the schools here we ran consistently 328s. We went to a meeting in Tulsa and ran a 321. In that place in South Dakota, we ran a 312.
Nice.
Mile relay. I'm not talking about 400. I mean, mile relay. Not 1600, mile relay, which is much farther. Okay. But ran a 312 because we had nothing to lose. So we were in a no mind state that was fun. That's what I'm saying. When I really try to do stuff is when I screwed up. Because my mind was trying rather than being. That's why I'm using that as an example. So what I want you to consider is when you were being, and at times when I was being, I was unconscious then. You were more than likely unconscious too, all your life. But you've been through that. That's what I want you to look at. Because it's what sets you up right now. So I'm saying right now you can say, as I practice, oh wow, the whole world is available to me. Does that make sense now?
Yeah.
So practice this. We can talk about this later. I want you to practice first. And it's not trying to get it perfect. It's trying to be without trying. It's doing without evaluating. So when you focus on your heart, that's why I want you to go to your heart. When you focus on your heart and breathe gently and deeply, keeping that feeling, it minimizes the mind input. That's what I want you to practice.
Yeah, I think it's coming to mind really because I know this stuff and I can see. It's funny when the world gets too loud and you need those meditations even more than normal. That's when it's harder to
Well, that's when I go through the emotional release. That's when I go through the emotion. That's why I had the emotional release exercise. That I go to that place of peace and then I let the emotions come. And I clear it. And the more I clear it, the easier it is. And there are times when I can just do that 24 minutes just like that. I don't time this. I just come out. Sometimes I go to sleep. But that's cool because my body saw a chance to rest and get a deeper sleep and it took it. So that's good. So I'm saying the practice is about not evaluating, but being. Because the moment you evaluate, you're going outside yourself. You do want to keep record.
All right.
Try those two exercises online that I have, and next time we can talk about that.
Okay. Okay.
But keep records of it.
Okay, and we'll put a link to your website below below the video, and we'll see. We'll have other people join us doing this.
Okay.
And we'll report back.
Well, this one I liked. This one is finally the way I want to do it. The rest, no. I worked on this. This is kind I want to present because I felt more fluent. I felt more like I'm in my element.
Yes.
And at times I might get a little blackout here and there, like the GPS. That was what I was trying to think of.
Yes.
The moment I let it go, it came to me. It's like the GPS that's what the military use that we have on our phones now. So I'm saying it's a practical application when you allow yourself to do it, minimizes the evaluation of it. Being.
Yeah, being in the flow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely, I like this one. Like you said, this was good.
Yeah.
I like this.
You can let the other ones go, but this is what so now the next one, I'll start. So that's part one. That's what I thought. So the next one will be part two, and I'll just do a summary of part one and then slip into part two. So what happens is that the way things work, we have to skip over stuff. Notice when they go from the Big Bang to certain points, they skip over a whole lot of stuff because they don't know what it is, but they take what they know. So I'm going to start with the cell.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll send you a copy of my latest presentation
All right.
because I've added,
All right.
I've added a lot to it.
Good.
Wonderful.
Good.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nolan.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for
Well,
sharing.
thank you. I've enjoyed this. I felt much better about it.
Good.
Definitely.
About the others,
We're
but I
more
felt
in the
good about
flow. I love
Yeah.
it.
Good.
Okay.
So next time we'll do part 2.
Yes.
you.
So,
All
so
right.
what do you want to do next time?
You know what? Right now, we'll have to work on that because we're trying to schedule this move, and it's
Yeah.
taking a lot of
Oh,
time out.
you're all planning on moving.
Yes. Planning on moving.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's taking a lot of energy, a lot of dedication to figure out how to make this thing work. So,
Okay. Go to
yeah.
your place of peace
Mhm.
and plan the move.
Yeah.
And see, in meditations, what I found out is once I make the plans, I go to meditations and I get downloads.
Mhm.
Changes the whole damn thing.
Mm.
So, and again, the more that's a way of practicing too. So use this move as a practice. Before you plan, go to your meditation. Then do the planning.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right, we'll do. But no, we'll set up that part 2 though. We'll get them going.
But there's one more part later on I want to talk about is creating.
Mhm.
Because when you go back to the Dallas area, you want to start creating what you want.
All right.
That's a part 3.
Okay.
It's
I
creating.
like this because it's actually kind of practicing what we're learning, practicing what we believe in, and
Yes.
making it, using it practically.
Mhm.
So
part 3 is creating.
Good.
okay.
I like
Cool.
that. Cool.
Cool.
Take care.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you
Talk to
so
later.
much. All right.
Bye-bye.